I want to welcome council back from break. Hope everybody had a great break. Welcome to everyone here and at home. And committee reports is up first, but Chief Kearns has asked to give us a little update, and I don't want him to have to wait on the rest of things, so we'll let him go first and give us an update.
Thank you. I was here a few months ago when arrests of campers underneath the Ferry Street Bridge came to all of our attention, and I told you at that time that I'd come back and summarize what occurred following or during the investigation. So that's what I'm here for. I'll just remind you that the campsite developed underneath the bridge, and the police department received quite a number of complaints about it. And when we visited there, we saw that there was open sewage and stacks or piles of garbage and refuse. And people complained from neighboring businesses and from the federal courthouse that people apparently associated with the campsite were harassing or frightening people who walked by. One of our watch commanders asked that it be addressed. Some graveyard, some of our sergeants on a graveyard shift went there, and under the belief that it was premises not open to the public, made 8 arrests for criminal trespass in the second degree and transported those folks to jail where they were lodged for that charge. They left some of the individuals who'd been camping there to deal with the camping gear and with the pets that had been left behind. Well, we opened an investigation. We initiated that. The police auditor classified it and for violation of constitutional rights. The investigation included a review of the police reports, a review of the in-car video that was available from the contact that occurred between our sergeants and the campers who were there. We interviewed Allie Valkyrie, who was serving as an intermediary or representative of the people who'd been camping. The campers were not interested in being interviewed. That's not rare, but it isn't the most common situation for us. And the employees that were involved were all interviewed. And the conclusion, what we learned is that the officers mistakenly believed that the property belonged to the city. Now that part is true, but they believed that it was premises not open to the public. It was not marked and as trespass with criminal trespass signs. And when the arrests occurred, in order to make it clear that people weren't allowed to camp there, the officers spray painted "no trespassing." They didn't do that. Some people suspected that was done in order to leave the impression that the signs had been there before the arrests were made, and that's not true. There were no complaints of rudeness or discourtesy. The investigation was entirely around the lawfulness of the arrest, and it was not lawful, and it was not in keeping with our policy. Our policy, which we've become experts with in the last couple months with the Sleeps protest, is to post signs and, on the first occasion, provide verbal warnings to the people who are camping. And that policy wasn't followed. So the allegation of violation of constitutional rights, I sustain that, and the case is now closed. And the entire investigation was monitored by the police auditor.
So, Chief, would you explain, especially for the public, that when you sustain something of that sort, what happens?
Then we do an analysis of previous violations of that type by our employees, and I make a decision about an appropriate level of discipline, and all of that has occurred. And that's not a matter that I can share with you publicly.
And that's because people have rights for that information to be protected, correct?
That's right. There are employment rights that
okay.
that limit what I can say about discipline.
Right. Just want to be sure people sort of understood the parameters. Any questions from any? Yes.
Well, this is more of a comment than a question. It's just kind of unfortunate that we can't know what the discipline was, but that's part of Oregon's pretty restricted public information laws. In Ohio, I always think about Ohio. It's just unbelievable. You can go on the Attorney General's website and learn anything about any public employee except their phone number and their home address. You can learn whether they've received commendations, whether they've been disciplined, you can read testimony of police investigations on the site, ongoing, before they've been adjudicated. So that's just kind of unfortunate that we don't have something like that here. And really, I mean, I can understand why officers might not like that idea, but I think it would actually increase the trust of citizens and the police, not diminish it if we had. But that's not our decision. That's a decision for Salem. That's all. Just more of a comment than.
Claire?
Yeah, thank you, Chief, for that update. I know folks were really wanting to know what happened with that investigation. Is there any public document in regards to that investigation that would be available to folks if they wanted to see it?
Nothing that's going to satisfy the interest that someone might have if they want to see the whole investigation. The police auditor's office in their weekly update, not last week, but the week before, summarized the case. And then our internal affairs office publishes summaries of cases, so it'll be, what you'll read there is less than what I shared with you tonight.
And then in terms of making sure future incidents don't happen, I know part of the role of the police auditor is to point to recommendations around training or protocol enhancements. Was there anything pointed to in there in terms of training to avoid a similar situation in the future?
Now, we have a legal advisor or a legal trainer. Local attorney has worked with municipal court, prosecutor's office, and the district attorney's office, and he trains at DPSST, and we've reviewed the policy on this and the legal standards. Frankly, there shouldn't be any confusion even before this happened about what's expected in circumstances like this.
Thank you.
Mike?
What's the specific charge or the specific policy issue language that you sustained?
It's constitutional rights. That's the name of the policy. So I sustained a violation of that policy.
Violation of constitutional rights.
Yes, and anybody can go to our police operations manual online and find that.
And was there any part of the complaint you didn't sustain?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Chief. We appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And certainly, what you just said is part of our meeting record tonight, so anyone can access the comments that you made this evening. So thank you very much. All right, next up is our committee reports. And I think what we'll just do is we'll do a round, and you can talk about a committee if you've been to one over your break or whatever else that you want to, any meetings that you've gone to that you think would be of interest or any other thing that you want to share. I will just make 3 quick things. Yesterday I did the Bethel Sunday Streets, and that was a great little event, and I really appreciated it having that happen. And then I want to say the first Friday Art Walk was amazing on Friday. I think there must have been quadruple, and we've been having a lot of people downtown, but it was just packed to the gills downtown and fun, and everybody talking about it, so that was great. Third piece is, you guys know that I serve on the Lane Act, the Area Commission on Transportation. I chair it, and so on Thursday, I'm going up to Salem to represent all the cities of Lane County on competing with other regions for funds for transportation projects. However, I will say that the way that works is our area team goes and meets with other people in our region. There are 5 acts in our region, and then we make recommendations from that to the Oregon Transportation Commission. So we don't necessarily get what we're one step on the pathway to the final decision making. But it looks good for us that it looks like most of our projects will receive funding. And if any of you want more information on that, I've got it here. So thank you. George?
Yeah, thank you. The Lane Transit District EMX Steering Committee meeting is actually tomorrow night, so hopefully I'll have something to report at the next meeting. But I did meet with Ellen Kennedy a couple of weeks ago. she's spearheading the public outreach on the West Eugene extension, and I recommended that she get a hold of Greg and Mike and Claire, bring them up to speed on the information that she gave me, and then after some discussion, I said, go ahead and bring everybody in on the conversation. That way we all have the same information, and I'm not trying to remember or paraphrase what Ellen presented to me. So hopefully she's either going to or has already contacted all the other counselors with that information. It's quite a bit that they're going to be doing, and like I said, I don't even want to try and paraphrase what all the different aspects of the public outreach that they're going to be doing in the next several months and years.
Great, George. Greg?
I didn't have any specific committee meetings, but to tag along with George's comment, I did meet with Ellen last week. I think it was Thursday that we met. And I kind of have a little head start on everybody else on this, being that I was on the LTD board when all this stuff started going on. And we had talked extensively about the public outreach process during the implementation of West Eugene MX at that time. So I kind of had maybe a little bit more information, and George too, because George has been on the MX steering committee for a number of years as well. So, I think that we're in sync, and hopefully everybody else will get up to speed on that as well. I couldn't join you for the Bethel event because I had a soccer event to go to. My daughter took priority the other day, so I was at a soccer jamboree. So.
Great.
But I'm glad that you were there. Thanks.
Betty?
Okay, the Lane Workforce Partnership was still functioning during the summer. The director, Chuck Forster, as you probably all know, is retiring. So we are looking for a new director. The governor has issued an order that all workforce boards will be rechartered in the next few years. And a part of that is a lot of the work that the partnership has done will be given to someone else. And they were talking about giving it to the county, and the county representative who was there didn't seem to think that was a good idea. So at any rate, we'll be hearing more about that later, but if you want to know details, you can ask me. And is it okay to talk about other things now? Or?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, I've had lots of constituent contacts in the last few weeks. First, I want to announce that the Southeast Neighbors Picnic will be on the 15th of this month at Tugman Park, starting at 4 o'clock. And that should be, they have lots of plans for that. It should rival the Friendly Picnic, which the mayor and I both attended, I know, and was huge. I've had many calls about cell phone towers. There are 2 being proposed in South Eugene, and the neighbors are quite concerned. One call about rats. Rats are proliferating in some places in South Eugene. And the person who called me said at first she was embarrassed about it, but then she found out all her neighbors had rats too. And she asked if the city is doing anything, and I found out that we aren't currently, but Seattle has a sewer baiting program. Maybe, I don't know if we should consider that or not.
Include Nutria, I mean.
I haven't seen as much of them lately.
Those are many concerns about traffic in lots of places. 39th Avenue, Amazon Parkway, 30th Avenue, Lorraine Highway, concerns about speeding. And a few people are concerned about homeless issues. A few, I say. Some, I've had people, they call me about something else, like traffic, and then they say, when are you going to get rid of those homeless people? Then on the other side, there are people who say, when are you going to do something to give shelter to those people? And I've had people call me very passionate about either of those points of view. And I just say, I'll fix it pretty soon. And as soon as I fix that paper bag issue, which I get a lot of comments about food. So I said, first I have to take care of the paper bags, then I'll take care of the homeless, and then the traffic. Civic Stadium, I think you've all been getting the letters, but I think some really compelling arguments about why we should not let that be destroyed. And I know we're going to talk more about that later. Somebody was concerned about the Parks Bond money, whether we had given away the natural area money to buy the Rexius property. And I said, no, that couldn't happen. Is that right? And South Willamette seems to be a topic of considerable interest. And again, I've met with people who are on both sides, all sides of that, I think, and some people, the latest group I met with thought that we should pay for a study of the economic effects of having 3 lanes. They said that the study, these people said the study only considered bicyclists and pedestrians and did not consider the businesses. On the other hand, when I meet with the bicyclists, they say, you're not considering the bicyclists enough. So that's another little controversy. That's all I have. Thank you.
George?
Thanks, Mayor. Neither of my committees met in August. I really don't have anything to report.
Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. The Police Commission did not meet in August, and sorry, inadvertent button there. The Police Commission did not meet in August, so the last report we had is most up to date on that. At the very beginning of our break time, or just shortly before then, I got an opportunity to attend an event, and I wanted to say thank you to all the other counselors who helped participate, including Councilor Zelenka, a number of years ago when we kind of made a creative budget agreement about how to deal with parks development monies and maintenance monies, and we were able to get Creekside Park developed and built in North Eugene a little bit ahead of schedule. And I went to the grand opening here just a few weeks ago, and it was a really beautiful thing to see that neighborhood park get opened and developed. So I appreciate everybody who supported that. Also had a chance to attend the Northeast Neighbors National Night Out neighborhood event at Crescent Meadows when the mayor was there as well, and a number of weeks ago, and that was a good event. And then the parade as well that we got a chance to participate in, and that was a lot of fun. I had a question with relation to the Willamette Street stuff that I developed after we had the staff presentation. I know that's going to come back, but I don't know if there are staff members here, but I'm hoping I can get an answer to this question. I'm wondering how many access points per block along that stretch of Willamette that's in question there are, and what how that relates to an average in our community for access points per city block. It's my suspicion that there are a great number more access driveways and streets per block in that stretch than other places, and I'd like to have some numbers and some kind of information to back that up.
Yeah, we'll ask Public Works folks to provide
Thank you very much. That's
Yeah, the mayor already touched on this, but the Metropolitan Planning Commission met, and the big part of it was talking about the short-term funding for projects that we have coming up the pipe that the mayor's going to go to the Super Act and be a super chair and do us proud. In the other part of what we did was looked at long-term projects over the next 2017 to 2020 kind of time frame, and some of those projects include the I-5 capacity improvements and the Beltline capacity improvement projects for us, and those are the main ones in Eugene. The Eugene platform, the train depot platform was another one. South Willamette, 24th to 33rd, and then Amazon Path to 5th, was also another
That was
one.
sent out in your packet last week.
Yeah, so this is a long list that was sent out in the packet of all the different projects that are potentially on the list for the long term. The mayor was talking about the short-term projects. That was about all that.
Claire?
Yeah, my committees did not meet during August either, but I still got to stay busy doing city council-related activities. I was really pleased to be part of the Opportunity Village ribbon cutting, where they brought on some of the pre-cut materials for the buildings that they're going to be building there, and got to meet some of the residents who will be living there. I think they've got, at that point, they had 16 folks who'd gone through the application process and it had been accepted, and they were still working on more. So that was a really neat event to be a part of. I also was invited by eWeb Commissioner Manning to join the eWeb commissioners on a tour of the Hayden Bridge facility. And some folks may have seen the article in the Register Guard with some photographs, so I was part of that tour. It was very interesting, really great to learn more about important public works and how they operate and what their challenges are. It was a great tour. I was also at Bethel Sunday Streets with my organization, Lane Coalition for Healthy Active Youth. It was neat to be there at the corner of Fairfield Elementary, a little muddy where we were, but still lots of fun, great event, and look forward to going back to Bethel at similar events in the future. I got the West Eugene MX update. Chris Pryor and I met with Ellen, and some of the outreach that they're doing around West MX, it's quite thorough, I think. They're really they're going door to door to every single business. They're trying to do more community-focused outreach, and also connecting with many of the many nonprofits that actually have access points or offices or facilities along the route. And they're going to make sure to do special outreach to those nonprofit organizations and the clients that they serve. And then had a great time sitting in a 1930 vintage automobile, waving at folks in the Eugene Celebration Parade. Definitely the way to ride through the parade. And was really pleased. I had one of my oldest friends, 16-year-old son, came to stay with us for a week, and he got to ride in the parade as well, and that was a real thrill for him. And he went home saying how much he loves Eugene, how wonderful everyone here was, and how he can't wait to come back.
That's good. City Manager?
Nothing to add right now, Mayor. Thanks.
All right. So on with the work of the evening. We'll start our work session on the Envision Eugene Roadmap. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll just turn it over to Carolyn. Get us started for the new session, for the new season.
Hello, Mayor and Council. I'm Carolyn Burke. I'm the Interim Planning Director, and we're here to talk about Envision Eugene. And because it's been a while, I thought we would ground ourselves in a little bit and refresh ourselves about where we've been, where we're going, and how we think we will get there. And I guess I would also describe my presentation as a bit of a preamble to many more conversations that we'll be having over the next several months. So just kind of setting the stage. So to begin with, and I'm doing a different kind of presentation. It's called a Prezi, and we'll see what you think. So we're going to start with where we've been. And this, as you'll remember some of these figures, but not only where we've been, but where we are. And economically, as a community, we know that our annual wages lag behind the rest of the state in a fairly significant way. And this is a trend that started in the 1970s, and it has widened ever since then. And today we're at about 15 to 17% lower annual wages than the rest of the state. So how does that manifest itself in our community and for the people who live here? Some of the socioeconomic indicators for our community are almost a 21.5% poverty rate, 56% of Eugene renters experiencing a housing cost burden. And a housing cost burden, you might remember, that means that a family is spending 30% or more of their income on housing costs alone. For Eugene homeowners, it's approaching 28% are cost burdened. And also, approximately 44% of students in Bethel and 4J combined were eligible for free and or reduced school lunches in the 2011 to 2012 school year. Another way to look at this gap is through this chart, where looking at about the past 40 years, we have seen wages increase by about 2%. We've seen rental prices increase by about 20%, and home values increase by 145%. Another way of showing the gap between incomes in the community and cost of living. So that's where we've been. A little bit about where we're going. So I'm going to jump ahead. You know, when we're taking a road map or taking a road trip, first we need to figure out where we're going. So to refresh our memories, envision Eugene. And this is the vision that was compiled by literally hundreds of community members donating thousands of hours to develop a vision for what we want Eugene to look like in the future. And some of the objectives that are included in Envision Eugene are to address those long-standing economic, social equity, and environmental issues, some of which I just went over, to protect our existing neighborhoods. That is certainly something people value very much and is part of the quality of life in Eugene, but also protecting our farm and forest lands that lie outside the urban growth boundary. To encourage compact development where we want it. And as a community, we have said that we want that growth in our downtown, along transit corridors, and other commercial areas. We also want to build on existing work and make use of our momentum, and to be adaptable and flexible as we move forward. So that's a refresher of kind of the goals and objectives of Envision Eugene, and now a little bit about how we get there. Implementation, there's a lot to implement here, and so I've broken it down into 3 different phases. The first phase of implementation is to establish a new urban growth boundary. And as the city manager was directed last June by the council to establish a new urban growth boundary and bring an adoption package forward based on the Envision Eugene recommendation, and also on a technical component document, which was attached to your AIS. And I will go over what is in that document in just a minute. So there are 3 types of actions that need to take place. There are efficiency measures, and we are proposing that, or we are thinking that we'll be having those adopted by about March of next year. And then there's the urban growth boundary and actually establishing where that line is, and then developing the plans and policies to support our vision moving forward. And our best estimate right now is that we'll be bringing that full package to you about mid-2014 for your review. So a little bit about each one of these actions as they were defined in that technical component document. First, efficiency measures. These are the actions that we need to take regarding land inside our current urban growth boundary. So we are required to show that we're using our land as efficiently as possible. And there are a number of actions that we were directed to take through council's action. And we are proposing that we bring those to you individually, not as one big package, but really individually, because they're very complex. We want good transparency, and we want good public process for each one of these actions. So I'm going to go through each one of those efficiency measures just in a little and touch on each one. So single-family homes, we were directed to develop land use code amendments to promote compatible forms of infill, such as alley access lots, secondary dwelling units, these types of smaller developments that produce infill in neighborhoods. We are currently taking this work through the Planning Commission. We actually have a public hearing tomorrow night with the Planning Commission, and it will be coming to you probably later this year around December. I should also say that each one of these amendments is being processed through the Planning Commission before it gets to you. They're not the decision makers here, but they are making recommendations for your consideration. So then there's also redesignating lands to single family, and that's what the map on the screen shows. There are areas we have identified kind of on the outskirts of the city where that are currently designated for either multifamily housing or other uses, and we think would make good single-family homes. So the proposal is to redesignate those to single-family, which reduces our need to expand the urban growth boundary for that purpose. Again, that should be coming to you early next year for your decision. Next, with regards to multifamily homes and commercial jobs, a number of efficiency measures here, and two of them we are actually done with. You've already acted on. The first one is the eWeb Master Plan and that package of land use amendments adopted in July. Also a package of land use code amendments that facilitates development downtown and along our transit corridors, also adopted in July. There are a few more things we're working on, though. South Willamette area planning continues, and we're currently writing code, and we'll be bringing that to you in February. And, of course, the community investment or the incentive discussion, which is ongoing, and which you will hear from Robin in the next presentation, a little bit more about that. And then there's industrial and other commercial jobs and how we will accommodate those. We also have code amendments and redesignations that we're looking at that will add flexibility to our employment lands. We're particularly looking at the light industrial lands around Chad Drive and also the various zoning along West 11th, how we can be more flexible to allow businesses to expand and provide more jobs on those existing lands. And we'll be coming to you with more on that as we go and with action scheduled for March. So those are our efficiency measures. And then, as you recall, we need to look at our urban growth boundary and where that will be located. We have identified a need for expansion for single-family homes, and that analysis is underway about where that might take place. Also, we have a need for mid to large-size industrial job sites. That area has been identified out by Clear Lake Road and the Eugene Airport. And also for parks and schools. There's two park sites and one school site identified to meet our public land need. And finally, plans and policies. And this is actually a significant chunk of work because currently our primary land use document that governs land use in Eugene is the Metro Plan, and that is shared with Springfield. So it takes the assumption that we have a shared urban growth boundary with Springfield. And through Measure 3337, we are defining our own individual urban growth boundaries, and as such, we need our own plans and policies to back that up. So that will come to you as part of the final adoption package, again in mid-2014. So that's phase one of implementation, and that is what we are working on currently. But I don't want to stop there because it's not the end of the story. There's still phase two and phase three. So a little bit about phase two is to continue implementing the strategies and actions that will put Envision Eugene and those 7 pillars will help realize that vision. This document is loaded with different projects and actions that are needed to take place. Right out of the gate, we have identified 2 neighborhood planning processes, one in the university neighborhoods to do an area plan for them, promote better compatibility, and also in the River Road and Santa Clara area. So those will be undertaken right on the heels of adoption. And in fact, we're laying some of the groundwork for that now. And then there's phase 3, which, as you recall, is ongoing monitoring and adjustments. And we have committed to making sure that this plan is dynamic. It's based on a number of assumptions and forecasts, and we need to check those assumptions regularly. We need to measure our success, and we need to make adjustments to our strategies in order to achieve that vision. So that is the Envision Eugene roadmap. That's where we are, where we're headed, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thanks for the way this document was put together. It's really quite clear.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much. Questions? Betty?
Can you give examples of some commercial uses?
Commercial uses, sure. So it could be an office use. It could be a retail establishment, like,
I know it could be retail, but what kind of office?
Could be, for example, medical office, like the 10 Coburg or, doctor's office, basically. Other types of stores, like, ranging in size from the small to a neighborhood commercial to a large Walmart. So it varies.
I'm wondering what, if any of those involve living wages. If we are giving assistance to anyone who is putting in a commercial building, would we be looking to see if they're giving a living wage?
I believe that will be part of your investment discussion and kind of what you want that program to look like.
Retail generally won't pay a living wage.
Retail is generally a low wage.
I was wondering why we need a lot of commercial space when we already have a lot of retail space.
Well, based on the work that we did with the Technical Resource Group, we looked at the number of people coming into the community, the number of jobs. We looked at trends with jobs that will be industrial in nature and what will be commercial in nature, and based on that, we were able to forecast what our future need was. Now, I will say that it's also a value of the community, and the direction that we were given is to not expand the urban growth boundary for any kind of commercial uses, but to keep those more in the core of the city. Same is true for multi-family housing. Mm-hmm.
So just to sort of further clarify on that, part of the land use planning in the state requires us to meet certain kinds of requirements for population with those industrial, commercial, and residential. And that's sort of the premise that we had used for the work that we've done.
That is correct.
All right, Mike?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the work. Great job, guys. Appreciate the update, too, on where we are and where we're going. I made no secret that I would have liked to have seen us get somewhere close to this sooner than we have, but so be it. We're getting there. One of my questions is about the stagnation of data that we're using and the legal basis for our using it. For example, I read an interesting article the other day that projected out population and talked about what we should be preparing for appropriately. And if my friend here is as right as he has been saying for a long time, we're going to have a number of climate refugees that we're not planning on. And we're going to have a greater influx of population than maybe we've counted on. The article that I read mentioned specifically that if you project out to 2035, that we're looking at well over 40,000 new residents than we have right now. Our PSU data says 34, and that's stuff that we based ECLA and everything else on. When did we adopt ECLA statistics based on the PSU numbers, and do those have a freshness date on them at all? Are we in danger of that data needing to be refreshed at any point?
Well, there's two things I think you might be talking about. One is the population projection, and boy, I'm thinking around 2008 or 2009
That's what I thought, too.
Is when
6 years ago.
About that, yep. And the next thing is then the buildable lands inventory, and that was the work of ECLA. And we have recently updated. So we basically reran our buildable lands inventory data because it was, I think, based in 2008. And so it is now brought up to 2012, I believe. And so that data, I think, is pretty darn recent. Regarding the population, we're required to use the projection that is adopted by the county. We don't really have any wiggle room there. But what we have said that we want to do is we want to monitor that as we go. And so if it does look like we are getting many more residents than we intended to, then we need to look at where those people are going to live and work. And as I said, adjust the plan accordingly.
We used to use LCOG safe harbor numbers, did we not, on stuff like that? Prior to the county's adoption, that they did, I suppose, is the better phrase?
I don't recall the history there, but I know that there was some safe harbor option at some point in time.
I have a concern that I'm sorry, I wanted to know legally, too, do we have any risk of, in need of, let me say this appropriately, not being able to prove goals appropriately because we're using data that's too old?
Well, like Carolyn said, we're actually using the state mandated numbers. So we're using what we're being told we have to use. Okay. So the legal risk there would be non-existent.
Does
really.
The county have any particular incumbency on them to refresh those numbers any particular time?
Well, actually, the state legislature did just pass a bill that would enact new procedures for identifying population forecasts. That is going into a rulemaking period that will probably take about 2 years. And at that point in time, we've actually already let both the LCD and Portland State University, who is actually doing the forecasting, we've let them know that we're very interested in getting updated numbers, and we would like to be at the top of their list. So I haven't gotten an answer back from them about when that would be, but
it was the board's decision on what basis to accept and set those particular population projections, correct? They had the option of using the safe harbor numbers or using a PSU study at the time that they accepted them, right?
No, I'm not clear enough on that history.
And I remember this conversation, but I'm at a disadvantage because Emily Jerome staffed all that and had all that, and she's not here. But we can I know that we have that information. I can get that information to you.
Right.
I know there was...
Well, I remember it. I'm just wondering. I was going to take it a different place.
Is it a rhetorical question?
Yeah, they did, as a matter of fact, have the choice. And they chose the PSU study to do as a matter of course, and it came out with a lower number. My question is going to be, what would happen if the county decided for any reason now to choose numbers based on a different basis or to do so with a refreshed set of numbers? What would that do to this work?
I think we would want to look at how that would be initiated, and then I'd want to get back to you with more information about how that would.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a complicated question.
Thank you.
I'm just going to say, as I recall, that's the reason they had the discussion in the legislature, is because they wanted to end these different conversations all over the state and to have one uniform requirement for accepting population, and that people would have to adhere to as part of the state work on that, so that everybody was playing with the same apples and apples, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, George?
Thanks, Mayor. The 34,000 increase number was based on Portland State's work, wasn't it?
Right.
Their predictions. Yeah, and I recall I was present for their present. I think I just got on.
George, could you speak up? You can't.
I think I just got on the council, and I was present for a lot of those discussions, and the reason they were chosen is because they have a really good track record. I mean, it's a guess. It's an educated guess. It's not going to be 34,000. It's going to be a little higher or a little lower, but they have a very good track record about coming very close to a population increase estimate. So that's why I think that figure was chosen. Thanks.
Claire?
Thank you. Just the questions that Councilor Clark asked made me ask a question. What does the reference of safe harbor mean?
It's the guesstimate. Oh, I'm sorry, you were asking them.
Whoever is qualified to answer.
Could be staff.
You might need to help me with this, Catherine, but safe harbor is a component of the state law that basically gives you the recipe to figure out some whatever component it is you're talking about. So, for instance, with population, if you follow step A, B, and C, then we will accept that, and it is fairly legal proof. And there are safe harbors for a number of different steps in the process, and population is just one of them.
And thank you. So obviously, I think it's important that we have this phase 3 part of ongoing monitoring and adjustments. But if we're prescribed by the state in terms of what formulas we use or what numbers we use, how much capacity do we have to make adjustments to those projections?
Well, whatever we do, we will still be following state law. So and it's basically the process that we're doing right now. We'd be able to revisit it much easier because we have so much of the analysis done to date, and we'll be monitoring as we go. And so we'll still be following all the requirements of state law.
Thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, I was referring to attachment A, which goes through each of the different assumptions and technical components of what we've done so far. And I had a couple of questions on second page, number 3, for industrial land, where it says that we're looking at 5 sites in the 10 to 20 acre, 2 in the 20 to 50, 3 in the 50 to 75 acre, and 2 75 to 100 acre. And does that mean that all of those sites would be looked for in the Clear Lake Road area?
Generally, yes, that is true.
So that they would be exclusively in that area? Okay. Second question, on page 3, you're talking about multifamily housing. Is it my understanding that the student housing is assumed to be handled through market forces?
That's correct.
Within the UGB?
Yes.
And then on page 4, we talk about the need for a single-family home expansion, and that's in those 4 areas: Clear Lake Road area, Bailey Hill, Gimple Hill area, Russell Creek area, and the Dags Cuts property. And we still have to go through and do that analysis. So I was wondering where you were on that. And my assumption is that we don't need all 4 of those. It would be some subset of that.
That would be my assumption too, and we're still working our way through the analysis. It is fairly in-depth. It looks at what the infrastructure needs are, what the costs are of that infrastructure, and so we're making good headway, but nothing conclusive yet.
Okay. And so that's part of the UGB expansion that will be approved by the mid-14?
Absolutely.
Okay. And is the annexation of the airport still on track?
We're still looking at that, at the pros and cons of that, and that will be brought to you as part of that package as well.
Okay. That's something I'd like to see happen. And one of the things that you said in your presentation materials, which was pretty good, by the way, is we have to revise the Transportation System Plan, TSP. What are we revising in that?
Well, we will need to show that our transportation system can support our land use plan. And so there will be no doubt mitigation measures that are needed inside the urban growth boundary in order to accommodate growth where we intend that growth to happen, as well as in any expansion areas. And so our transportation system plan needs to be consistent with whatever our land use policies are.
And the changes can come in a variety of different things. They can be additional transportation projects to serve certain areas, or they can be lowering the level of service on certain transportation facilities in areas that we've decided that we will accept more growth and that the community be willing to accept an increased level of congestion. So it's not a one mitigation to address all of the growth plans. It is looking at our transportation facilities as a whole, deciding what we need to do for long-range planning to address the manner in which we're going to grow.
So, for instance, more density in the downtown area, there's very little mitigation that actually could occur from a transportation perspective. If we want it to be more dense, then we have to loosen that standard.
Correct.
And then finally, on the last page of your presentation, you had measuring success, and you had 3 metrics, which I think are good starting point. And I think there obviously needs to be a more robust set of metrics that we're going to be doing.
These are just examples.
Yeah, I know. And I was wondering where that was in the process of going through that process.
We do have, I would say, the beginnings of a draft program laid out, and although not required by the state, our intention is to bring that to you as part of the formal adoption process, because the conversations that we've had with you and with the community, it really is an integral part of the plan. So that we'll be bringing that to you probably the beginning of next year.
Right, I think those are really critical as we move forward, especially at that 5-year look back, and we're going to be able to say, are we on track or are we not? And these metrics, I think, are going to be critically important and very important to develop it and get right, and modify that we don't get right. And we'll make sure that we get them right over the long term.
George Bowling.
Yeah, I've got a question on the single-family homes land. The DAG Trust property, where's that located?
That is the area that is located, I believe, to the west of Hynix.
Is that,
Alyssa, is that right? DAG Trust?
Bailey Hill?
Yes. Yes.
that's different than the Bailey Hill,
That is different than the Bailey Hill site.
because the Bailey Hill area was the one where we received a lot of comments from the people out there about the steepness of the grade and the natural woodland and stuff, and wasn't the DAG property added because it's a single property, basically single property owners that's willing to play in annex?
That is correct.
Okay, very good, thank you, that's all I needed to know.
I think this is it's been a long trip, so you have to kind of revisit how we started many times, and I just think it's important for us to remember that one of the council decisions we made at the beginning was that there was a discrete amount of work we had to do, but we wanted to take that advantage of this and do more work to be sure that we really looked at everything that people were interested in about the future growth of our community and how it was going to go. So we ended up taking on a much bigger bite than just what was required, and that's been taken a fair amount of chewing, is what I would say. So, but that was what we set the path out to do, because we said, why not try to do a lot of this when we have to do part of it, right? So that's why we get asked that question a lot. Why are you doing all of this? But the fact is that we made that decision at the beginning. Okay. Yes.
One last question, if I could. There's kind of a policy direction question here that I wonder if could or should be part of our conversation, and it's not so much about the legal requirements for setting UGB, and it's not so much about the trends that we are seeing or will see and hope to see, but maybe a question of what do we think is the right thing to see regionally. That question for me is because I've seen some information recently that talks about how if we stay on the trends that we're on, and if we see the growth projections that we expect in the PSU numbers and the work that's being done, we're going to see exponential growth in the surrounding communities and quite a bit smaller amounts of growth in Eugene. which have a significant impact on exterior transportation issues. I'm wondering if it shouldn't be part of our conversation to say, what would we like to see happen by our work, and what would we like the impact to be regionally? Would we like to have, to make sure that our work allows so that we're not inadvertently pushing growth onto the outlying communities, the Coburg, Creswell areas?
Only, I'll just pipe in here and just say that as I recall the whole Envision Eugene meeting after meeting after meeting, we were talking about that very topic. Everybody at the meetings was talking about every decision and recommendation was made was in mind about how we looked at, I can't tell you how many meetings, I'm looking out here, got brought up that that every decision we make could have an effect on the surrounding communities. It was part of that discussion. John?
Forgive me, but I mean at this table.
And what I would say is one opportunity could be, as the lane livability conversation comes back to this table, part of that really is a regional conversation, and Envision Eugene, the context in that. So if you choose to do that, that might be a good place to actually have some of that policy conversation, because you get some of that overlap with both.
And things are changing. I mean, the growth that's happening in Junction City, I mean, there are a lot of moving parts right now. So. All righty then, we're ready to finish up this discussion. Thank you very much, and we're going to go on to the Community Investment Program update.
Turn that over to Robin. Are you up? Yeah. Okay. We have less time than we did before, so. Okay.
We were starting just at the time it's supposed to.
Well, perfect. Kind of a fixed presentation here anyway. Oh, okay.
Yes, 5 minutes early.
All right, morning. We are early.
We are early.
More time.
You have more time. 5 minutes more time.
Okay. Nice. What's he thinking? Well done, John. We're flexible. Somebody's on vacation.
I'm Robin Hostick with the Planning Division, and I'll be giving the presentation. But Denny Bro is joining me at the table. He has a lot more experience with the individual programs, some of which I'll be mentioning. So in case you have questions, we'll both be here to answer those. We'd like to start out by going briefly over some of the work leading to Council's previous direction to staff on this project. Some of this may be a little bit of a recap for a lot of you, so just kind of bear with us here. As many of you may recall, early on during the Envision Eugene discussions with the Community Resource Group, there's a lot of discussion about the feasibility of relying on redevelopment as a growth alternative to expanding the UGB. As you know, Council direction to staff in June of last year was to try and hold the existing UGB for commercial jobs and multifamily housing. And that was the way staff has been directed to do that is by finding ways to boost redevelopment along the key transit corridors in the core commercial areas. The idea behind that was to keep that density out of the existing neighborhoods, promote things like 20-minute neighborhoods, revitalize some of our core areas with more residents and economic activity, reduce the need to drive a car, and a lot of others. So this approach really supports virtually all of the Envision Eugene pillars. So the bottom line is that this goal depends on somehow getting more redevelopment to happen. And this has been a long-standing part of the community's preferred way of responding to growth. At the same time, one of the observations of folks on the Community Resource Group was that the mixed-use redevelopment didn't happen in the past on its own the way that people had hoped it would. This is where the term phantom capacity really came from, is during this discussion. And it's just the idea of banking on redevelopment without really having a complete understanding of what it would take to make that happen. So to study the issue, the technical resource convened and really rolled up their sleeve. And the aim was to try to find out what exactly we can expect. And this was really a learning process for everyone involved, including staff. So they worked for months doing research and analysis to find the best information, and in doing so, learned a couple of important things. One is that the market in Eugene just doesn't support redevelopment in the form and in the location that are needed if we want to hold the UGB for all the multifamily and commercial development for the next 20 years. They found themselves facing what they eventually came to know as this market feasibility gap for redevelopment. And this boils down to the fact that rent and lease rates here in Eugene are very low, but construction costs remain high. Eugene's low rent and lease rates are largely a factor of low income, and there's some figures that we looked at back in our workshop in March of this year, showing that Eugene, compared to Portland, has 26% lower median household income. So having low wages translates to low rent and low lease rates in commercial properties, and this is a key factor in determining the feasibility of redevelopment. So the Technical Resource Group analyzed the market feasibility of a whole range of different development types, and that's from really low intensity to a higher intensity, like you see in the diagram up here. And as they discovered, only the lower intensity types of development made financial sense. So what this means is that over the next 20 years, we're really only likely to see some single-story retail replaced by newer single-story retail, with the possibility of some low-density apartments and possible two-story apartments. So the good news is that the TRG also learned that there are some ways to help close this market feasibility gap, but that it wasn't going to be easy. What they said, and all the information provided to council at the time of the recommendation really said the same thing, is that it would take a lot of commitment to not just one, but a whole kit of tools to get the job done. So that was determined by council to be the most reasonable and responsible approach given the alternatives, and that's the path we've been asked to pursue. So the technical summaries attached in your AIS also say that if we're not successful in creating the toolkit, or if the tools themselves don't work for some reason, council will need to consider other measures to accommodate the need, which could include upzoning residential areas to a higher more intensive use, or expansion of the urban growth boundary. That's not the path we've been asked to take. That's only making it clear what the implications would be of making a different choice. It's also worth noting that all of the benefits and goals that are achieved by taking the approach of investing in redevelopment would not necessarily be supported by making a different choice. So this is really central to the community's vision. It's also worth pointing out that Portland, which currently has the fastest growing economy, I believe, of any city in the country at the moment, even with significantly higher wages than Eugene, Portland has invested heavily in redevelopment over many years, and they continue to do so today. So here in Eugene, the emerging revitalization of our downtown is also the direct result of decades of investment and would not have been possible without it. This demonstrates the powerful effect that council can have in improving the community by using the tools available. There is no other organization or entity which can act locally to make this kind of difference. So now, just as a reminder, and I believe this came up in the last discussion, this need for multifamily housing and jobs that we've been directed to meet through redevelopment by using these tools does not include student housing near the university, nor does it include medical office buildings. Redevelopment for these particular uses has been shown to be financially feasible in the market, in most cases, depending on the location and the intensity. For example, people may point to the Slocum building or 10 Coburg and feel that redevelopment is happening on its own. But the reason for these exceptions is that rent rates for these specific types of uses are actually a lot higher than for other kinds of uses. So there may be other good reasons to invest in these developments on a case-by-case basis, but as far as meeting the 20-year need is concerned, the assumption is that these types of development will happen through natural market forces. So let's take a look at the first attachment in your AIS. This is an evaluation matrix. And the intent here is to show the whole spectrum of possible community investments. And there's a bit of brief explanation. I know you might need a magnifying glass to see that. The idea was to just show them all in one place, so you can kind of get a sense of what the array of options are. So we evaluated those just in a general way against some basic criteria, and these criteria include, first of all, effectiveness, and that's how much the tool actually makes a difference in stimulating redevelopment. Another criteria is feasibility from an administrative and legal standpoint, whether we can actually do it. Whether the tool has a direct impact on a project, and this is important because some tools actually result in a specific project, and you know that if you make that investment, the project is going to happen. Not all the tools have that feature. And finally, whether or not the tool requires some source of upfront funding to make it work. So there are three categories of tools that we looked at: financial tools, facilitative tools, and regulatory tools. And this goes way back to some of the conversations we've had prior to the Envision Eugene recommendation. In the financial tools category, there are only 3 financial tools that do not require upfront funding. And that is MUPTI and SDC deferral, both of which have been used in the past by council, as well as a new tool that we're continuing to study that looks at using tax revenues to pay SDCs for certain projects in certain locations. In a similar example, the city of Springfield, I believe, has recently committed to using city-controlled funds to pay SDCs for redevelopment projects in Glenwood, along with some other investments to try to get things off the ground in that area. So the result of the rest of the financial tools, rather, all of these actually do require an upfront funding source. So many of these, like financing and land assembly, these are some of the most powerful and flexible tools in the kit. It's like an adjustable wrench. Should have brought my toolkit. And nearly all of these have been needed, actually, to enable the emerging revitalization of downtown. So you notice at the bottom of the financial tools list there's actually 2 tools that are labeled funding method under the column on the right-hand side for funding criteria. The first one is tax increment financing, and it's locally known as urban renewal. And the way the tool works is that this is actually a way of generating funds so that any of the other tools that require upfront funding can actually be enabled by that. So there are other ways to fund these tools, but urban renewal or tax increment financing districts is a way that many communities across the country who are successful in making these kinds of transformations actually use. The second funding method on the list is local improvement districts, and essentially what that is a special assessment district where all the property owners in the district contribute towards a fund that makes some kind of an improvement, like a parking garage or utilities or something that benefit that district. So obviously, in order to use any of the financial tools that do require a funding source, either these or some other funding source would be needed. And all the tools requiring funding are also currently available to council through the existing urban renewal districts. Let's see, in terms of the whole set of tools for comparison, the City of Portland has really kind of maxed out its toolkit. And for example, they've expanded urban renewal up to a total of 13 districts citywide. And they've also made, I believe, over 10% of the property inside the city limits available for tax exemptions for multifamily redevelopment. So again, this just demonstrates the extent to which they've invested in their community. Moving on to facilitative tools, these really don't have any financial impact on the bottom line, or very little. So in other words, just doing these alone isn't going to do much. But in conjunction with financial tools, it can really help. It can amplify the effect of those tools, and it can help achieve other goals like livability. And at the very bottom of the page, there are a couple of regulatory tools. The first is reducing minimum parking requirements, and it's probably one of the most effective tools in the kit. Excuse me. Just in terms of not only making projects financially feasible, but also providing a way to boost the intensity of the jobs and the housing that can be accomplished on a particular site. So this can be controversial, we'll just acknowledge that, because of concerns about parking spillover into adjacent neighborhoods. But it is an important option to consider, especially in combination with effective shared parking. and management strategies, as well as improving conditions for walking, for biking, and other kinds of transit modes. Should also note that the downtown area has already reduced parking requirements to 0 through the parking exempt zone. Density bonuses, which is the last item under regulatory tools, has been used locally, but there hasn't been much response to that. And the main reason is because virtually all the multifamily projects in Eugene, except for student housing, typically develop at the lowest density allowed by code for that zone. So there hasn't been a desire to go beyond that from a market standpoint. So finally, over the last couple of years, the community has weighed in on some of the tools that we're talking about here, and we understand that there are different opinions about the pros and cons of each one of the tools. Our goal is to develop a comprehensive and flexible set of tools and policies that council can use to achieve the community's vision. And investing in the community is a necessary part of that strategy, and it remains the most reasonable and responsible approach given the alternatives. And the return back to the community for making these investments is significant. A recent national study, for example, showed that investing in compact development brings 10 times the return back to the community in tax revenue alone, and that's in comparison to conventional development. In addition, saving farm and forest land, which can never be replaced, saving millions of dollars in ongoing operational costs, creating places to live near services and transportation options, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, revitalizing our commercial areas, and many other benefits are gained from making these investments that are sometimes difficult to quantify, but certainly make that initial question of investment an important one to consider. So that concludes our presentation. Welcome your comments.
Comments or questions? George?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple questions first. I'm kind of hard to get when you see different terms for, like, there's homes and units. Mm-hmm. How many people are in a home? How many people are in a unit? What does that mean? Is there a multiplier there?
Yeah, there is. I'm not sure right off the top of my head what it is, but a unit is, I think it's something around 2.5 people, or a unit or a
fraction.
home. Yeah, and whether that's single family or multifamily, it's all averaged out.
It's one, whether you're talking about a home or a unit. I mean, it's the same multiplier.
But I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but I believe
Okay.
that's true.
Well, at some future, it's not that important right now, but I'd like to know what that multiplier is, because just analyzing this stuff, it's nice to know that. Play around with the figures and add, subtract, and multiply. So if I could get a kind of a firm understanding of that would be good. Then on page 29, I'm looking at land for commercial jobs, and I see that the recommendation is the 1.4% job growth rate. Mm-hmm. Do you know that Portland State figured out that we're going to increase our population by 34,000 people? Do you know what the percentage growth rate that was? I see that the first line item is 0.87, and then in parentheses it says same as population growth rate. Mm-hmm. Do you know if that was the...
Yeah, I don't recall exactly what the population growth rate was, but I'd have to double check that.
Okay. Well, if we could get that information, sure, like next time we talk about this, that would be good. Because then, I look at that and I go, well, gee, if that's... Why would the job growth rate be higher than the population growth rate? I suppose some of that may account for people that are unemployed, but... and also in this same section, we're going to increase by 34,000 people, but at a growth rate of 1.4%, which is the recommended, Eugene will need to accommodate about 35,800 jobs, which is more than the population increase. So this doesn't make sense to me. And another thing that I don't understand about this is, of that 34,000 people, these are not all going to be healthy, active age workers. There's going to be a lot of children, and there's going to be a lot of retirees. And some of the people that will be moving here are boomers like me. Their retirement's not too far away, and so I think that, I just look at those two figures and I go, there's no way that adds up. So I think we need a little more analysis.
Yeah, we can be happy to bring more
of that,
information back
too.
about that.
We can give more. One of the things I recall, and again, we'll provide more detailed information, is that on the job growth, we would experience higher percentage of job growth than population growth because we are the employment center for the broader region. And so while other communities may grow in physical population, we would capture a portion of their population growth in our job growth.
And conversely, our citizens will be taking hospital jobs in Junction City, and I imagine most of the employees at Peace Health in Springfield are from Eugene, would be my guess.
So all that
Probably the vast majority.
Gets taken consideration. That we can get you the details of how that actually got calculated out, though.
Okay, but it gets a little messy because we're told we're told we can't worry about Springfield. We have to think about Eugene only. We can't take into account Veneta houses that might be built there.
Thanks, George.
In other words, we have to forget about regional planning.
Thanks, George. It's just...
Okay, thanks.
Mike and Greg are in the queue. One comment I'd make about that is some of the information we have is disaggregated for Eugene, and other information we have is not disaggregated, and we get it as a county information. So it's mixed in terms of how we receive different statistical information. Mike, you're next, and then Greg.
Thank you, Mayor, very much. Tonight, at the very end of our council meeting, we're going to have a short work session on issues relating to homelessness and the things that we're doing around homelessness in Eugene. I would submit that that's a regional problem, and every time we talk about it, it is, but we feel in Eugene that we should address it differently, and that we should make efforts specifically in Eugene to address what is a regional problem, and I think that's a good thing. That's fine. Whenever we talk about economic development, we always fall back on the idea that it's a regional thing that we have to do, and we don't ever dive into it as hard as I would hope we would on a local basis. George brings up an interesting and I think an important point. If unemployment was 4% or something like that in 2007, and it's 8% now, that 4% difference is roughly what, 6,000, 7,000 jobs, right?
That's correct.
So we have to have that many new jobs just to get back to pre-recession employment, plus the growth rate, plus the fact that we're an employment center. And by the way, those pre-recession job losses aren't calculated into any of this discussion, are they?
Actually, I believe they are.
They are. For the 35,000 is a difference from 34,000?
Yeah, we can bring more of that information back with
I'd be very interested in that, because from my recollection of our previous discussions, we don't calculate what do we need to do to address our local unemployment rate as not just something that we have to have as a regular part of planning towards, what we expect the population change to be, but how do we change the effect of what's going on right now at the same time? Thank you very much.
Greg?
This is a different twist on what Councilor Clark just talked about. The bigger problem, in my estimation, is poverty. And homelessness is a result of poverty. There's other things that are a result of poverty in the community that, yes, we need to address from a regional perspective, but we're kind of the big dog in the fight as Eugene, and I think that we have a responsibility to be a catalyst to attack poverty. And one of the things that I'm looking at in terms of the commercial jobs and the other aspects of redeveloping our workforce is, and we just had a report from Councilor Taylor about workforce development and the changes in the administration, Chuck Forrester retiring, is what specific plans do we have to reinvigorate and revitalize the current workforce that is dormant here to retrain people, to get people prepared to go into jobs that will be available in the near and into the distant future, and how are we preparing for that specifically, not only as a city but as a region. I understand that, Lane Community College can't train everybody, but it has a significant role in this. But what are the other pieces that are necessary to prepare our workforce, our potential workforce that already exists here, to be able to get into those jobs and to create that kind of, push to get to create more economic activity and more people with jobs that actually pay decent wages. Not everybody can work at Walmart, or should they? That was a question, not a speech, but.
No. Denny, you want to field that one?
Well played.
We agree. I would just say that, we have a regionally adopted prosperity plan, economic development plan. We haven't had an economic development plan for 20-something years, I think, before this one. It's an uphill climb. I think if you look at the statistics about Eugene and the region, we have a long way to go. We have some really ambitious goals as far as eliminating low wages and lowering unemployment and growing wages in the community. But we have a lot of work, and I think we're making some strides forward. But we do recognize it's a huge uphill climb from where we are right now.
Well, are there some specific tools that, other than what we've outlined here, that can be utilized to prepare that workforce?
I think between these two, they're pretty interesting questions, and I think what I would suggest is maybe we have a separate work session on a couple of those. And the reason why is because there's part of this is a land use conversation, which says you just have to make sure there's enough land for the growth. I think part of this conversation also is it's not just how do you make the land available, but it's how do you actually bring prosperity to the region, regardless if it's about the new people or it's about the current people that were laid off. And so I think maybe what we do is we bring that kind of a conversation apart separately. It could include what are some incentives or investments we could also do about workforce, not just as part of a land use conversation. So,
yeah, because the thing that I've heard for a long time is from a lot of people in the business community is that, the people that we have out there are ill prepared to fill the jobs that are available and will be available. And some kind of way we need to be proactive in closing that gap.
and I know maybe a different conversation would be great to have, I think.
Just add to Claire's next, you could make available to them the information we have from the Regional Prosperity Plan, and also the work that was done specifically around those certificates or whatever that the young people are going through, that businesses pay more attention to and hire when they see them because they've met a qualification level that gives them a better entry into jobs, and we have been working on that, and that might be of interest to you to see.
Yes, so I think there's a variety of those things that would be good to have and get some feedback from all of you on.
Look forward to it.
All right, Claire?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the comments from my fellow councilors. I think one way the city could engage in the economic prosperity is lead by example and pass a living wage ordinance to sing one of Councilor Taylor's favorite tunes that I also support. So that could be part of our future conversation as well. I had actually some more mundane questions related to the presentation. I was curious, although it says draft and for conceptual reasons only, who actually filled out the matrix? Okay, good. Thank you. It's always good to take credit for your work. I didn't know if it was a committee or if it was the two of you or...
yeah, I had to help.
Okay.
I put the checks in the boxes.
That's what yeah. Well, and you helped decide which...
It was a staff effort. It wasn't
boxes
just
got checked. Okay. I was curious Robin, you mentioned that reducing parking requirements boosts the ability, I'm paraphrasing, to create jobs or utilize the land for jobs better. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. In fact, we did some recent analysis in cooperation with a couple of property owners out in the South Willamette area. It was kind of a shared learning process to understand, in that case, some of the what the implications would be for the ability of a property owner to do something in the long term in terms of redevelopment, given various options for the street and different code configurations. And what we found is that that parking is really the single largest factor in determining the amount of development that can occur on a particular piece of property. So, for example, the higher the parking requirements, the greater portion of the site is going to be dedicated to actually providing the parking. So conversely, the less parking you have, the more building square footage you have to accommodate housing and jobs. It also impacts the bottom line because the more efficient your property is in generating square footage that you can lease out for jobs or rent out for housing, the more financial sense it makes on the bottom line.
Great, thank you. That was really helpful. And then I was curious also about the density bonus piece. Can you speak a little bit, I know there's some detail in what you offered to us, but can you speak a little bit about how that density bonus works?
Well, I believe the only one we have in place right now, and I'm looking at Danny, is the vertical housing program.
It's
Talk
a
about that.
tax, the vertical housing, which we haven't done one yet, but we have a vertical housing development zone, which basically gives you a tax exemption based on density. So if you mix housing above commercial and achieve a certain density, and the higher density you get, the more tax exemption you get. So that would be kind of under the category of a density bonus. We've been talking about it in the MUPTI program as well, potentially giving some additional incentive for higher density and other public benefits that a project may achieve.
Other options include that could be code-based, or that if a project does something that is in the public interest, for example, providing additional open space or something else that's needed in the community, that through a code mechanism they could be allowed a greater density or another floor of height or something along those lines. And I don't believe we have any in place, but the City of Portland has a couple of items in their code that do things along those lines.
And then in that same section, it refers to a minimum allowed density. And what does that refer to? Or what is it?
Minimum allowed density. Well, regarding that most properties only develop just above the minimum allowed density?
Well, it says, it says most projects have been built at minimum allowed density, so that implies that there's some rule that says you have to have a minimum.
That's correct.
density.
So for various land use designations across the city or zones, there's a minimum and a maximum density. For example, the R2 zone, I believe, has a minimum density of 10 units per acre. And if you look back historically at what's been done in Eugene and average that out, it comes to 10.5 units per acre. So just above the minimum. You can go up to 20 units in that zone, but 10.5 is the average that's been done. Similarly, for the R3 zone, I believe, or R3 and 4, which is, this is getting into a little more detail, but the minimum density is 20 units per acre, and you can go much, much higher than that, up to over 100 units per acre, depending on what the actual zone is. But the average, looking back historically in Eugene, is 20.5. So again, half a unit above that minimum.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
And George?
I'll be very quick, Mayor. It's more of a comment than questions. First of all, I want to thank you for the presentation, and I just kind of want to refer to your closing words, where you mentioned the desire and necessity of saving farm and forest land, quote, which can never be replaced, unquote. And so I just hope that we councilors remember that when we look at the Clear Lake Road area, which would put quite a few factories and lots of houses in close proximity to each other on irreplaceable Class 1 and Class 2 soils. So I think we need to keep those words in mind when we really get around and start drilling down on the proposed areas for expansion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And any other comments? With that, we'll close this meeting. Back again at 7:30.